Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to do a walkthrough of this render, teaching you all the different steps to kind of go into creating something like this. So if you're new to the channel, please like and subscribe, and let's get into it. Okay, the first piece to this is starting out with a block out. I like to do this so it can give me a general idea of how I want the camera set up and the scene to look. For this, I usually add in a camera, a mannequin, and some simple blocks to kind of build the entire scene. For the camera, I do some pretty quick setup in the beginning, mainly because I know exactly what I'm going for. So for this, I would change the film back to DSLR since it's full frame. And then I will change the current focal length down to 24. So it's a nice wide image. And then I'll increase the aperture to 22 because I know from the get-go, it's a landscape scene and I want everything to be in focus. Beyond that, I will add again the mannequin so I have a size reference throughout the entire scene. And then from there, I'm just using simple blocks that you can get from the basic shapes and just adjusting it and bending it in different ways to kind of get an idea of where and what I want in my scene. Uh, the other piece of this is really just pinning that camera to the bottom right so you can always see like what is being added to your scene and how you want it to look. Simple. From there, we bring in the assets. The next is bringing in assets into your project. So the two things that I used to create everything you see here is the Electric Dreams kind of project that was dropped, I think, for 5.5 or 5.4. And then the other one is the Temples of Cambodia. I know that the Electric Dreams is a free environment. It's absolutely awesome. And you can take all the assets from there and bring them into any of your other projects. For this one, you actually have to create the project and migrate it. I'll explain that later. And then for the Temples of Cambodia, you can just upload it straight to your project. Main thing with that one is I do know the Temples of Cambodia is a paid asset. I believe it's $99. I hate when this happens. Cambodia. Here it is. I believe it's $99. Yes, I know it's quite expensive. Completely understand. This was free, I think, 4 or 5 months ago via the limited time sale. So I would always check that out to download because a lot of these are really awesome and you can use them in really cool ways. So if you're ever curious about that, you can go over to the Discover tab on Fab. You can scroll down and you'll see this right here, limited time free. Perfect example of this is the matte painting skybox. I think it's awesome. I actually bought it 2 weeks ago and now it's free. So I would always go on here and check it within a year. By the end of that year, you'll have so many really awesome assets you can use. So always go on here and grab these free assets. But once those are brought in, I can actually close this. So once you bring in all the Cambodia assets, the next one that I did was I really just brought in the Electric Dreams. To do that is simple migrating. If you're ever curious about migrating, you can actually do Control Space because you're going to want to migrate via the content browser. If you're ever curious where anything is in your scene, so when you're in Electric Dreams, you can always right click on anything and go over to Browse to Asset, and it'll show you exactly what folder it's saved in. I think for the Electric Dreams, it was Smart Assets, Meshes, and I don't know, maybe Assembly. But what you can do is you can actually right click it and go over to what says Migrate right here. And for that, you can save your scene. Once you're done saving your scene, a full checklist like this will pop up. Then you can click OK. And all you need to do is pick the content folder of the project you want to migrate it to. So just go to really any project you have open. You can click on it and then go over to content, click select folder, and it'll migrate all those assets over into that project. Next time you open that project, you'll have the folder with all of them. So really easy way of moving around assets and getting really cool assets from a lot of the project packs that Quixel and Epic Games drop. So now that you have all the assets, the next thing I did was really just doing some simple project setup. So the main thing with this is the Electric Dreams uses substrate materials. I believe 5.7, it is automatically enabled. I did this in 5.6, which means you have to enable it yourself. To do that, you can go over to Edit, go to, I believe it's Project Settings. In the search bar, type in Substrate. Make sure all of these are checked. Once you make sure all those are checked, you're going to be prompted to restart your project. Don't do it yet, because the next thing you're going to want to do to make sure you have everything in your project is go over to Edit again, go down Plugins, type in Movie Render Queue, and enable Movie Render Queue. It's going to help us render our scene. And then go over to HDRI and enable HDR Backdrop. Once you do that, close and restart your scene. Okay, and now this is our scene with all the normal lighting turned on that is kind of comes with Unreal Engine. So now the first thing that I did when I got all the assets in my scene was I just set up the focal point, which is our temple. And I wanted to do this because it's really where you build everything off of. So for the temple, it was pretty easy. If you click on it and kind of just move it upwards, you're going to see that there's one just giant blueprint that actually comes with the Cambodia setup. Same with the left and right of the temple. If I just move it up, again, it's all one giant blueprint. The only main thing I changed was if you go through a lot of reference of Cambodian temples, a lot of them were kind of built higher than the ground. In this case, I felt if I just used the temple portion, it was going to be a little too low to the ground and look a little weird. So what I did is I used these floor or temple wall assets to kind of build a perimeter around it just to kind of give it some more height. And then I had that asset kind of drag out here. Then I added in these two statues, this staircase, and then I just did the same to the other side. So generally, kit bash wise, super simple to kind of add all this stuff in. After that, what I did is I actually just brought in the same asset, which is this ground stone floor asset, and I scattered it around on our ground, kind of create this path that heads to the corner of our scene. So if I actually go back up, I can pin the camera so you can see what I was building off of. So while I'm building this entire scene, I have this camera image on our bottom right, so I can make sure everything's being built out according to the way I want it to be seen, which is super handy. So I used all of this, or I built all of this, and right after that, the main focus was the floor. So what I can do now is actually get rid of all our objects, and you can kind of see what we're working with, which is just our floor. I can even actually, let's see, get rid of instance objects. So this is our landscape material. In this particular case, I actually used a static mesh and vertex painted all of this on. The reason I did that is lately I've been a really big fan of William Foucher's Easy Mapper. Super helpful, and it's a really easy way of just having a material set up for you. If you don't want to spend the money to buy it, it's super simple in this particular case to create a landscape with a ground and then a wetness added to it, which is all I used. I believe I have a tutorial on it. If not, I know there's plenty of other YouTubers that have tutorials exactly of how to build this material for absolutely free. You'll get the exact same results, which is a super simple floor. From there, my next focus was one, turning on displacement. So I have a slight displacement throughout our entire scene. And then it was bringing in some foliage to really build out the ground and get a very clear idea of how I want it all be laid out. If I was actually going to create this scene again, I think one thing I would have done was I would have done a pass of foliage before I laid down our path right here, because once the path is down and you start laying foliage, it does a lot of weird things. In this particular case, I think I've deleted most of them, but sometimes you'll have, say, foliage painted off this surface, and then the foliage, like if it's leaves, will just be sticking out of the ground, which causes some weird stuff. So I kind of wish I actually laid some foliage down to get the ground covered and then laid down the bricks, and then I would have laid down foliage again to give it that second layer. But you learn. Once the foliage was in, the main thing was really just adding in static meshes to really bring the scene together. So for this one, I used blueprints from the Electric Dreams. This is just one giant blueprint to kind of frame our scene. And then these are the European hornbeam trees that are inside the Electric Dreams asset pack. And then the other piece I did was some rocks and kind of just added foliage to the rocks and our blueprints. Just give them some extra kind of grit and like interest. So like these trees are fake, stuff like that. Or not fake, but don't come on the asset. And then the last piece was also adding a lot of foliage to the overall temple to kind of get that fully layered up. Next is the lighting. So for the lighting, I knew I wanted this to be a nighttime scene and kind of have more of like a ominous appeal to it. So the first thing I did was I brought in an HDRI. So to do that, all you really need to do is go over here to the Place Actors panel, type in HDRI, then you can just drag and drop that into your scene. Now, kind of heading over here to deleting all of this, I brought in this lighting right here to our scene, and then I can bring in our HDRI. So this is our HDRI. I can have a link to it below. It's super easy to get the HDRI into your scene and kind of have it provide light and an overall look and feel really quickly and really easily. And it's super helpful. So I definitely suggest HDRIs. I'll provide a link to where this one was below, where you can download it and add it to your scene. It's very simple. Once you import it, it'll pop up here in this drop down list. You can grab any of them, throw them up in your scene, and use them right away. After the HDR was in, the next thing I did was I brought in a directional light, which works as our overall sunlight. So I can actually move it around and you can kind of see how it's affecting our scene. And then after that, I also brought in the environmental height fog, which is a really nice fog system within Unreal Engine, and then a post-process volume. The main point of the post-process volume at this stage is to make sure you're locking in the exposure, because it's incredibly hard to get the lighting that you want if your exposure keeps changing. So what you can do is add in a post-process volume. If you're not sure where to find that, you can go over to the box of plus, go down to volumes, and add in a post-process volume right there. Bring that into your scene. In the search, just make sure you click bound, and then click infinite extract unbound. Make sure that's clicked, which means it's now affecting your entire scene. Then after that, you can go over to exposure and just make both of these 0 and 0. You can always play with this after the fact, kind of adjust the wholesale exposure. But in my case, I ended up on 0, 0. From there, my next focus was dialing in the directional light. So if you go over to the directional light, I have the actual lux set to 3.5. And since this is a night scene, I made sure to adjust the color over to be slightly blue, so it kind of has more of like a night feel. After that, I actually changed the source angle over to 20. A perfect way of seeing this is right now it's on 5, and you can kind of see how the shadows are really kind of soft. If you bring this down all the way to 0, you now see how the shadows are extremely harsh. Harsh shadows are more likely to be under harsh sun, which means you would see them kind of like midday, think noon lighting, kind of shooting straight through the trees. That's where you kind of expect to see more harsher light or harsh shadows. In this case, if you want soft shadows, it is adjusting the source angle. Currently, it only goes up to 5. You can click on it and actually type in a higher number. In my case, I went with 20, which now you can see softens it greatly, which again gives it more of like an ominous feel, which I really like. The next piece to this is adding in our extra lights to give it that final kind of color when it comes to lighting. So if I shut all those lights off, this is how our scene looks. You just have an empty silhouette and kind of no texture to the scene. So these kind of ancillary lights are really what I'm using to provide that texture. So if I go over, the first pieces to this are adding edge lights and then some texture throughout. So if I go over to Spotlight 5 and kind of turn it on, you kind of see all that actually did that was placed there just to make sure that you can see kind of a wetness on that material floor. My main thing there with adding that was I noticed that if you didn't add that in, it kind of just looked like an empty patch of dirt and it looked like it was just not meant to be placed there. So I wanted to add some emphasis to the fact that yes, there is water there. There's something shining off the ground. After that, this other light is again really just meant to kind of fill out the left part of our scene. From there, I add in another spotlight. Again, this one is just meant to kind of fill out slight colors in our scene. From there, we add in spotlight 2, which is going to be our edge light on the top half. So if you actually go over here, if I turn this off, you can see you don't see anything up here. Then I turn it on, you can see now there's an edge light on this corner right here. And then another one just to give it a little more emphasis. After that, I actually use a rec light behind the crown of our temple. Again, just to add an edge light. And then from here, I'm using point lights around our scene just to add some extra light since it's very dark. This left one is really meant to fill out the left side of our scene. The right one fills out the right. And then we kind of have a little more light coming through. And these last two are really just meant to emphasize our temple kind of face in the darkness. So again, if I have all these lights off, this is what it looks like with just our general lighting. And then this is what it looks like after we add all that lighting in. And again, this is just meant to add different pieces throughout. Now, the last thing I kind of did here is a lot of times in animation, they kind of tell you just to build out what is in the scene. That way, or that's why if you look like left or right, it's just empty kind of cloud. Nothing's over there. It's really just kind of Hollywood cinema. Only what the camera sees is what matters. But the other piece of that is you can also place things outside of what the camera is just to add some texture overall. And that last piece of lighting was actually adding in this tree. So if I move this tree, you can kind of see in the bottom right, now there's so much light coming through, and it's just like this moonlight. And I didn't want that. I wanted to add some texture to the light that was coming through as if something was up there kind of blocking it. So to do that, I just added in that tree, just kind of break apart the light and give it a little more kind of dark feel to it. From there, the last piece is kind of just doing the final touches when it comes to color and when it comes to atmosphere. So for that, what I did was I went to the post-process volume and I just made some small changes to the global color. So for this, I went into global, I turned on contrast and gain and kind of just played with that a little bit. And then I also played with the overall gain of shadows. Again, just kind of add some extra contrast. From there, I kind of focused on the exponential height fog, and I decided on a density of 0.039 for the fog. Again, if I adjust the fog, that's kind of like the difference in our scene, kind of having fog and not having fog. It actually offers a nice bit of illumination and again, texture throughout. And then the next piece to this is I also used the volumetric fog at 0.01. All you really need to know about the scattering is if you're looking at the light and you turn the scattering high, you're going to get like these nice kind of bulbs of light, light shafts. But if you're looking not towards the light, you can actually get some nice light shafts shooting through your scene from the side. So that's how you get it. If I move it all the way up, you'll see it kind of disappears. So you can play with the way the fog actually, or the light plays with the fog by adjusting that scattering distribution to the way you want it to look. And then from there, I added fog cards. So with this, again, William Foucher's Easy Fog, big fan of all his like easy set. I actually think it is on sale right now. I think he's doing like a Black Friday sale. So if you're curious, you can pick up, I think all his 3 easy packs for super cheap. Definitely suggest it. his stuff's great. But if I kind of go and hide everything and then show everything, you can kind of see how what I add is very subtle. In fact, the best way of seeing it is kind of these wisps that are up here on the right and on the left. And if I just go through and hide them one more time, you can see those wisps disappear. So again, it's just to add kind of just that extra piece into the fog. And I want it to be very subtle, just kind of growing off itself. After that, the main two pieces to the scene are really the fire, which is the nice moving fire. That comes pre-made in the Cambodian set. It is BP Torch if you buy it and you're curious where it is. And then the next piece is really just our Niagara system to drop our leaves to add, again, that extra piece of texture. For the leaves, Niagara is pretty simple in this particular case. All you really need to do is, where's my Niagara system? All you need to do is create a blowing particles preset. So if you're not curious what any of that means, you can do Control Space, right click anywhere, create a Niagara system. And when you click create a Niagara system, you're going to be presented with a bunch of presets. And the preset you want to use is blowing particles. If I actually click on this and click create, this is the base blowing particles. The only difference here is you will have sprite renderer turned on. The sprite renderer, if I go out, is going to just be kind of like white little sprites that come in and out. I would say if you don't want to buy an asset, for this particular scene, you could easily make these like a dark green or black, and it will look like leaves. You really won't be able to tell. In my particular case, and in future cases where the scene's lit, you definitely need a leaf asset. What you do is you can go in and add by clicking add right here and adding in a mesh renderer. In that case, this will pop up, and then I added in a leaf from a ground foliage pack that I will have linked below if you're curious. I think the pack is great. It's not my pack. I think it's like $7, and it just comes with a bunch of different ground foliages that you can use. But it's hard to find a single leaf, so this is an easy way of me adding that in. The only other changes I made here were in the spawn rate. I adjusted the spawn rate to be 10. And then with the shape location, a normal sprite or a normal kind of preset will be sphere. I changed mine to box plane and then up to 2000 by 2000. What that necessarily means is it's going to spawn out of that box. By making the box larger, the area of kind of falling leaves is now larger since the area it drops from is larger. So what I did is just adjust that just so the leaves kind of encompass the full scene and are falling from everywhere instead of just a tiny little box that you don't really notice. So I just adjusted that. And then my last piece here is, what did I do? Oh, I adjusted the lifetime min and max to 20 and 25, just so they lived a little longer since I wanted them to touch the ground before they disappeared. And then with that, we had our Niagara system added in and all our light kind of adjusted the exact way we wanted to. The main piece that I do want to add back in this is a lot of this was kind of iterating off of and changing a bunch of different ideas as I was going through it. I think the number one thing you don't learn from beginner tutorials is how to really kind of create something new. I think beginner tutorials are really nice when it comes to kind of learning something, but what a lot of people don't realize or don't think about too often is you've already created that scene. So when you're recreating it, it's really a step-by-step process. They're not teaching you how to iterate. And I would say when I was creating this, I would play with the light, move some things around, play with the light again, move some things around, and I'd tinker with a lot of different stuff before I ever settled on a final idea. And that is probably the number one thing that if you get out of any of this is feel comfortable kind of playing around and adjusting things and playing around and adjusting things, because it's the only way you're going to learn the actual program, and it's the only way you're going to create better and better stuff. But with all that said, the last piece of this is the render and the color grading. For the render, it was pretty simple. I just created a level sequence. If you're not sure how to create a level sequence, just box the plus, or sorry, the clapperboard, add in a level sequence. Within here, I added a Niagara system life cycle. when you don't add a system life cycle, the second the render starts, the second the Niagara system will start, which means you'll have leaves starting to fall, not already falling once you render your scene. So adding that in there is a really easy way of kind of making sure that's maintained. The next one is just adding in the camera, and a piece of that would be the camera shake. I added in a simple camera shake. If you don't know what a camera shake is or never added it in, you can do it by clicking right click in the content browser, going to Blueprint class, typing in camera shake, opening that up. Once you open that up, you can change the root shake pattern to per lin and kind of drop all of these values, and then just change the duration to 0, which means it'll last forever. And then you can just adjust the amplitude, frequency, amplitude of location or rotation until you feel like you like where it's at. And then just actually add it in your scene for the camera component. Just click plus. At the very top, you'll see camera shake. Once you've made that camera shake base, they'll all pop up right here, just like you see that new blueprint one that I just made, pop up right here. Add it to your scene, and you're good to go. And the actual shot itself is super simple. Just kind of looking down to the ground, panning up, and then cutting. All pretty easy to create and or recreate. From there, I go over to the clapper, go to unsafe config, settings. I do anti-aliasing, .exr, and game overrides. Game overrides just ensures all the settings are maxed out. Anti-aliasing for this particular cut, I did 72 and override anti-aliasing. I always export JPEG so I can check the export as it's exporting. I never actually use the JPEGs, but it's always just an easy thing for me. And then I do .exr so I can have really the best output possible. From there, you can go over to output. You can change your output resolution to whatever you want it to be, and then pick the output directory, click accept, and render. From there, I bring everything I work on into DaVinci Resolve. Now, I'm not going to go too heavy into the changes I made, but this is the tree that is kind of our edit. Generally speaking, I'm not the best color grader. I'm trying to get better at it. But my main piece here was I want it to be kind of dark and sparse. I didn't want it to have a lot of color. So what I did was I kind of adjusted the saturation and then played with our contrast and our tint and our pivot and the details to kind of key in where I want it to be. And then if I go over here to these graphs, I adjusted some of the color down. And then I also adjusted the overall saturation of the different hues. So you can see blue's kind of the lowest saturated, then it rises for the reds, and then I pop the greens, and that's about it. Which means a lot of the colors are kind of desaturated, except for the green, which I think gives like a really unique view to it. The next piece to this is the effects. This first one is halation, which I think does the most in this edit, which is really just super simply adding in this nice like hue to the light over the temple. Now, if I actually turn this one off, what is that? It will look like this. Then I turn it back on, it kind of has that brightness to it. I can even actually click on it and I can show you how much it changes the light when you kind of adjust the threshold. And then you can also adjust the strength and stuff like that. What was it before? Is this? You can adjust the strength and stuff like that to kind of get a less brightness or more brightness. And I think it adds a really nice interest. The next one is chromatic aberration. If you kind of go to the edges and zoom in, you can see there's slight chromatic aberration there. I just added that in by using this right here. Again, the main piece of that is it will appear within normal lenses in real life, just adds that extra grit to the scene. And then the last bit here was a nice film grain. And with that, that was really how I created this full scene. So I hope this was helpful. If you want more walkthroughs of any future renders, please like, subscribe, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you guys in the next one.